Hi everyone, and welcome back to Questions on the Parsha. This week's Parsha is Parshat Va'era, and our first question has to do with beginnings and endings. You know, we're used to thinking that the oral Torah and the written Torah are really two separate things, and by and large they appear so. But one of the most profound places that the oral Torah touches the written Torah is where our Parshiyot begin and end. There is no concrete marker for the beginnings and the endings of the weekly readings. This was a decision by the sages. And so my question for you is this. Last week, we ended our Parsha in the middle of a conversation, which this means this week we pick up in the middle of it. And at the end of this week's Parsha, we end in the middle of the process of the 10 plagues. There's still 3 left over. The question is, what is the message in the beginning and the ending of our Parsha? Every good story has to have a beginning and an end, and you can learn a lot about the storyteller from where they lie. Okay, second question, and that is about the word yada. Yud, Daled, Ayin. What exactly does it mean? Now, we classically translate it as to know, and indeed our Parsha starts out with Shmi Hashem lo nodati lahem, when God is talking about the distinction between the relationship he had with Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and the one that he's seeking with Moshe, right? Lo nodati lahem, I was not known to them through this name, right? We're going to have to ask a question about the nature of that nodati in 1 second, but we see this word repeatedly through our Parsha. In the 6th chapter, in the 7th line, we see that God's purpose is v'yadatim, ki ani Adonai Elohechem hamotzi etchem mitachat sivlot Mitzrayim. The reason God is causing all the plagues to happen and bringing Am Yisrael is so that we should know. And furthermore, v'yadu Mitzrayim ki ni Adonai, in the 7th chapter, in the 5th line, that Mitzrayim should know. There's a whole lot of knowing going on. Now, when we look a little more deeply at the origins of this word, it first appears in the 2nd chapter of Breshit and the 9th line. And there, it's when God talks about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And interestingly enough, he tells Adam that if he should eat from such a tree, death will come from the world. The first verb usage is in the 4th chapter of Breshit, in the 1st line, when it says, Adam yada et Chava, right? And the man knew his wife. And from this comes a child. This means that this knowing now, instead of bringing the death into the world that it had brought in the 2nd chapter, brings life into the world. Finally, Rashi on our pasuk, the 6th chapter in the 3rd line, says that, what does it mean that God was not known to the Avot through his name? We see that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob called upon Shem Hashem. What he says is that they had not yet recognized the fullness of God's relationship because they had been promised and not seen those promises fulfilled. That was what Moshe was meant to do. So that's my question for you. What does this word, yada, actually mean? Okay, last question. And this is a little bit more direct. In the 8th chapter, in the 18th line, we see an amazing assertion by God. He says, V'hifleiti beyom hahu et eretz Goshen asher ami omed alaha v'bilti yot sham arov. Right? God is going to make a distinction between the land of Goshen, where the Jews are living, and the land of Mitzrayim, where obviously the Mitzrayim live. Right? And in that, he's going to teach us that I am the God in the midst of the land. It's fascinating. There's a process going on in all the plagues, and I encourage you to look through them and see how time and space and target all shift through that process. But here, God is making a distinction. I ask the question, how does dividing between Egypt and Goshen teach that God actually exists in the midst of the earth? Okay, that's our questions for this week. Shabbat Shalom.